Chapter 15 of Characters of Shakespeare's Plays by William Hazlitt. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Nemo. Richard II. Richard II is a play little known compared with Richard III, which last is a play that every unfledged candidate for theatrical fame chooses to strut and fret his hour upon the stage in. Yet we confess that we prefer the nature and feeling of the one to the noise and bustle of the other, at least as we are so often forced to see it acted. In Richard II, the weakness of the king leaves us leisure to take a greater interest in the misfortunes of the man. After the first act, in which the arbitrariness of his behavior only proves his want of resolution, we see him staggering under the unlooked-for blows of fortune, bewailing his loss of kingly power, not preventing it, sinking under the aspiring genius of Bolingbroke, his authority trampled on, his hopes failing him, and his pride crushed and broken down under insults and injuries, which his own misconduct had provoked, but which he has not courage or manliness to resent. The change of tone and behavior in the two competitors for the throne, according to their change of fortune, from the capricious sentence of banishment passed by Richard upon Bolingbroke, the suppliant offers and modest pretensions of the latter on his return, to the high and haughty tone with which he accepts Richard's resignation of the crown after the loss of all his power, the use which he makes of the deposed king to grace his triumphal progress through the streets of London, and the final intimation of his wish for his death, which immediately finds a servile executioner, is marked throughout with complete effect and without the slightest appearance of effort. The steps by which Bolingbroke mounts the throne are those by which Richard sinks into the grave. We feel neither respect nor love for the deposed monarch, for he is as wanting in energy as in principle, but we pity him, for he pities himself. His heart is by no means hardened against himself, but bleeds afresh at every new stroke of mischance, and his sensibility, absorbed in his own person and unused to misfortune, is not only tenderly alive to its own sufferings, but without the fortitude to bear them. He is, however, human in his distresses, for to feel pain and sorrow, weakness, disappointment, remorse, and anguish is the lot of humanity, and we sympathize with him accordingly. The sufferings of the man make us forget that he ever was a king. The right assumed by sovereign power to trifle at its will with the happiness of others as a matter of course, or to remit its exercise as a matter of favor, is strikingly shown in the sentence of banishment so unjustly pronounced on Bolingbroke and Mowbray, and in what Bolingbroke says when 4 years of his banishment are taken off with his little reason. How long a time lies in one little word! 4 lagging winters and 4 wanton springs end in a word. Such is the breath of kings. A more affecting image of the loneliness of a state of exile can hardly be given than by what Bolingbroke afterwards observes of his having sighed his English breath in foreign clouds, or than that conveyed in Mowbray's complaint at being banished for life. The language I've learned these 40 years, my native English, now I must forego, and now my tongue's use is to me no more than an unstringed viol or a harp, or, like a cunning instrument cased up, or being open, put into his hands that knows no touch to tune the harmony. I am too old to fawn upon a nurse, too far in years to be a pupil now. How very beautiful is all this, and at the same time, how very English too. Richard II may be considered as the first of that series of English historical plays, in which is hung armor of the invincible knights of old, in which their hearts seem to strike against their coats of mail, where their blood tingles for the fight, and words are but the harbingers of blows. Of this state of accomplished barbarism, the appeal of Bolingbroke and Mowbray is an admirable specimen. Another of these keen encounters of their wits, which serve to whet the talkers' swords, is where Almerle answers in the presence of Bolingbroke to the charge which Bagot brings against him of being an accessory in Gloucester's death. Fitzwater. If that thy valour stand on sympathies, there is my gage, Almerle, engaged to thine. By that fair sun that shows me where thou stand'st, I hear thee say, and vauntingly thou spakest it, that thou wert cause of noble Gloucester's death. If thou deniest it, 20 times thou liest, and I will turn thy falsehood to thy heart, where it was forged with my rapier's point. Almerle. Thou darest not, coward, live to see the day. Fitzwater. Now, by my soul, I would it were this hour. Almerle. Fitzwater, thou art damned to hell for this. Percy. Almerle, thou liest, his honour is as true in this appeal as thou art all unjust, and that thou art so, there I throw my gage to prove it on thee, to the extremest point of mortal breathing. Seize it, if thou darest. Almerle. And if I do not, may my hands rot off, and never brandish more revengeful steel over the glittering helmet of my foe. Who sets me out? By heaven, I'll throw it all. I have 1,000 spirits in my breast to answer 20,000 such as you. Surrey. My Lord Fitzwater, I remember well the very time Almerle and you did talk. Fitzwater. My lord, 'tis true. You were in presence then, and you can witness with me this is true. Surrey. As false, by heaven, as heaven itself is true. Fitzwater. Surrey, thou liest. Surrey. Dishonourable boy, that lie shall lie so heavy on my sword, that it shall render vengeance and revenge, till thou, the lie-giver, and that lie rest in earth as quiet as thy father's skull, in proof whereof there is mine honour's pawn. Engage it to the trial if thou darest. Fitzwater. How fondly dost thou spur a forward horse! If I dare eat or drink or breathe or live, I dare meet Surrey in a wilderness and spit upon him, whilst I say he lies, and lies, and lies. There is my bond of faith, to tie thee to thy strong correction. As I do hope to thrive in this new world, Almerle is guilty of my true appeal. The truth is, that there is neither truth nor honour in all these noble persons. They answer words with words, as they do blows with blows, in mere self-defence, nor have they any principle whatever but that of courage in maintaining any wrong they dare commit, or any falsehood which they find it useful to assert. How different were these noble knights and barons bold from their more refined descendants in the present day, who instead of deciding questions of right by brute force, refer everything to convenience, fashion, and good breeding. In point of any abstract love of truth or justice, they are just the same now that they were then. The characters of old John of Gaunt and his brother York, uncles to the king, the one stern and foreboding, the other honest, good-natured, doing all for the best, and therefore doing nothing, are well kept up. The speech of the former in praise of England is one of the most eloquent that ever was penned. We should perhaps hardly be disposed to feed the pampered egotism of our countrymen by quoting this description, were it not that the conclusion of it, which looks prophetic, may qualify any improper degree of exaltation. This royal throne of kings, this sceptred isle, this earth of majesty, this seat of Mars, this other Eden demi-paradise, this fortress built by nature for herself against infection and the hand of war, this happy breed of men, this little world, this precious stone set in the silver sea, which serves it in the office of a wall, or as a moat defensive to a house, against the envy of less happy lands. This nurse, this teeming womb of royal kings, feared for their breed and famous for their birth, renowned for their deeds, as far from home for Christian service and true chivalry, as in the sepulchre and stubborn Jewry of the world's ransom, blessed Mary's Son, this land of such dear souls, this dear, dear land, dear for her reputation through the world, is now leased out, I die pronouncing it, like to a tenement or pelting farm. England bound in with the triumphant sea, whose rocky shore beats back the envious surge of watery Neptune, is bound in with shame, with inky blots and rotten parchment bonds. That England, that was wont to conquer others, hath made a shameful conquest of itself. The character of Bolingbroke, afterwards Henry IV., is drawn with a masterly hand, patient for occasion, and then steadily availing himself of it, seeing his advantage afar off, but only seizing on it when he has it within his reach, humble, crafty, bold, and aspiring, encroaching by regular but slow degrees, building power on opinion, and cementing opinion by power. His disposition is first unfolded by Richard himself, who, however, is too self-willed and secure to make a proper use of his knowledge. Ourself in Bushy, Bagotier and Green, observed his courtship of the common people, how he did seem to dive into their hearts with humble and familiar courtesy, what reverence he did throw away on slaves, wooing poor craftsmen with a craft of smiles, and patient underbearing of his fortune, as 'twere to banish their affections with him. Off goes his bonnet to an oyster wench, a brace of draymen bid God speed him well, and had the tribute of his supple knee, with thanks, my countrymen, my loving friends, as were our England in reversion his, and he our subjects next degree in hope. Afterwards he gives his own character to Percy in these words: I thank thee, gentle Percy, and be sure I count myself in nothing else so happy as in a soul remembering my good friends, and as my fortune ripens with thy love, it shall be still thy true love's recompense. We know how he afterwards kept his promise, his bold assertion of his own rights, his pretended submission to the king, and the ascendancy which he tactically assumes over him without openly claiming it, as soon as he has him in his power, are characteristic traits of this ambitious and politic usurper. But the part of Richard himself gives the chief interest to the play. His folly, his vices, his misfortunes, his reluctance to part with the crown, his fear to keep it, his weak and womanish regrets, his starting tears, his fits of hectic passion, his smothered majesty, pass in succession before us, and make a picture as natural as it is affecting. Among the most striking touches of pathos are his wish, "Oh, that I were a mockery king of snow to melt away before the son of Bolingbroke," and the incident of the poor groom who comes to visit him in prison, and tells him how it yearned his heart that Bolingbroke upon his coronation day rode on the roan Barbary. We shall have occasion to return hereafter to the character of Richard II in speaking of Henry VI. There is only one passage more, the description of his entrance into London with Bolingbroke, which we should like to quote here, if it had not been so used and worn out, so thumbed and got by rote, so praised and painted, but its beauty surmounts all these considerations. Duchess. My lord, you told me you would tell the rest, when weeping made you break the story off, of our two cousins coming into London. York. Where did I leave? Duchess. At that sad stop, my lord, where rude misgoverned hands from window tops threw dust and rubbish on King Richard's head. York. Then, as I said, the Duke, great Bolingbroke, mounted upon a hot and fiery steed, which his aspiring rider seemed to know, with slow but stately pace kept on his course, while all tongues cried, God save thee, Bolingbroke! You would have thought the very windows spake, so many greedy looks of young and old through casements darted their desiring eyes upon his visage, and that all the walls with painted imagery had said at once, Jesus preserve thee, welcome Bolingbroke, whilst he, from one side to the other turning, bareheaded, lower than his proud steed's neck, bespake them thus, I thank you, countrymen, and thus still doing, thus he passed along. Duchess. Alas, poor Richard! Where rides he the while? York. As in a theatre the eyes of men, after a well-graced actor leaves the stage, are idly bent on him that enters next, thinking his prattle to be tedious, even so, or with much contempt, men's eyes did scowl on Richard. No man cried God save him, no joyful tongue gave him his welcome home, but dust was thrown upon his sacred head, which with such gentle sorrow he shook off, his face still combating with tears and smiles the badges of his grief and patience, that had not God for some strong purpose steeled the hearts of men, they must perforce have melted, and barbarism itself have pitied him. End of Richard II.